Welcome to European Journeys, where, as you can see with the setting around me, Christmas is just behind the corner. So what I would like to do today is have a break from our current series. We'll return to it after the Christmas break. And I would like to talk to you about a Christmas tradition and especially explore its history, how it came to be. That tradition that I'm talking about is the Moravian Christmas star. Here you can see one example of it. We bought it this summer, in fact. And this Moravian Christmas star has a history that is quite interesting to know. And to understand this history, to know about this history, we will visit a place in the eastern part of Germany. It's a small town named Niesky. It's at about 15 kilometers from the border with Poland. And as you can hear, the name Niesky sounds rather Slavic, but it is not linked with the proximity to Poland. In fact, Niesky is itself a Moravian name, a Bohemian name, which means low or lowly. Well, as you have probably understood already, this was a town where the Moravian Brethren settled. In fact, they were the founders of this town. And if you go there to Niesky today, you will find many marks of the Moravian Brethren there. The main square, for example, in the town is named after the Count Nikolaus von Zinzendorf Platz. And there we find a church building that belongs to the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Germany. But that's not the building we are going to look at today. The building we are going to look at is just next to it, and it doesn't really look like a church from outside. But if you look inside the church, you will realize that that is a specific church setting that the Moravians established. Well, if you don't know who were these Moravian Brethren, we're going to start to talk a little bit about who they were. As their name suggests, Moravians, they were Moravians. They came from what is today Czech Republic. And in fact, in Czech Republic, already in the 15th century, 100 years before the beginning of the Reformation in Germany, there was already a Reformation movement there, which started with the famous Czech reformer Jan Hus. And really, the Protestant movement there never stopped. But by the 17th and 18th centuries, the Protestants in what is today Czech Republic were persecuted by the Roman Catholic Church, and many had to flee to save their lives, and many of them fled to the neighboring nation of Germany. Well, a group of such Moravian brethren arrived at the estates of a rich German count named Nikolaus von Zinzendorf. That's why we have Zinzendorf Platz there in Niesky. And these Moravians settled there. The count, who had become a Christian, who had adopted the Christian faith through the Pietist movement in Germany, opened the lands for these brethren to settle. And so they settled there in the early 1720s. And in 1727, they began a prayer watch, a non-stop prayer watch, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. A prayer watch that will last for over a century. Can you imagine that? For over a century. And this prayer watch really triggered one of the major, and especially one of the first, Protestant missionary movements. People would go from that place to the far ends of the world and bring the gospel wherever they went. Well, that place became known as Herrnhut, the Lord's Watch. And so these Moravian brethren, as I said, went all around the world, but they also went in other places in Germany. And other counts heard of them and also began to open their lands to them, such as Sigmund von Giersdorf. He lived not so far from Herrnhut, 40 kilometers away or so. And so he opened his lands to another group of Moravian brethren, and there they established the town which became known as Niesky. They named it low or lowly because of the flat lands that were there in comparison to the mountains that they had in their home country. But it had also a spiritual meaning, They wanted to emphasize their humility, their humbleness before the Lord. So they settled there and they established that town, which will quickly become a center, a prosperous center for businesses and crafts. And so that's where we find the earliest mentions of this star, what we call today the Moravian Christmas star, where in fact it was not meant to be initially a Christmas decoration. We find the mention of a 110 points star, for example, in the early 19th century, in the journal of a boy that was staying there at the boarding school. He probably saw that star in the classes of his geometry lessons, where the teacher probably used such a star to illustrate his lessons. And we also read in some accounts that for the 50 years anniversary of the school, such a star was placed at the entry of the school as a decoration. So these are the origins of the star. And by the end of the 19th century, the decoration began to spread, and it became a decoration for the Advent season, appeared in churches, and many people began to want to have such stars. But by that time, the stars were still made out of paper, so they were not very stable. And so a businessman from Niesky began to fabricate, to create a more stable star made of more stable materials, and began to sell them, began to answer the demand for such stars. And so people began to buy those stars, and it began to spread all around the world. The name of that businessman was Peter Verbeek, and still to this day you can buy stars, in fact, right there at the factory in En Hoed. It's handmade, and so these stars are still possible to buy today there. A little comment about the origins of the star and what is linked to the origins of the stars. The entry of the journal of a boy that was there at the boarding school. In fact, the Moravians were the creators of the boarding schools. Now, why would they create a boarding school for the children? Well, in fact, it is because since many Moravians were going to missions at the time, children could not travel with their parents. It was too unsafe for them, too dangerous. And so the children were left back to their community. And so they were taken care by the community. And so that's why they created boarding schools. And they also understood that these children needed to receive Christian education, particularly at a time when German rationalism was on the rise. So that was also an answer to the rise of German rationalism, to bring Christian education to keep these children safe from these godless philosophies. So that's for the history of the Moravian Christmas star. And of course, this star today reminds us of another star that appeared some 2,000 years ago in Israel, in Bethlehem, when our Lord Jesus Christ was born. So with this, I would like to wish you a peaceful and a blessed Christmas. Thank you very much, and see you next time for another stage of European Journeys.